The target's convoy entered the street exactly 6 seconds later than expected. Yahya Sinwar sat in the rear of the lead vehicle, curtains half drawn, a man who had spent a lifetime surviving other people's plans to kill him. Outside, Gaza City was a carcass of concrete and dust. Drones circled invisibly at high altitude. Somewhere above the clouds, an Israeli operator tracked 3 white heat signatures inside the car. Somewhere else, on a quiet military base, a Mossad liaison watched the same feed and a digital clock counting down to a point of no return. The street looked almost ordinary. A fruit seller pushing a cart, a child on a bicycle, 2 men arguing beside a shuttered pharmacy. But every doorway, every rooftop, every car parked at the curb meant one thing to the people watching the screens: angle, cover, potential collateral. A strike that killed the mastermind of the October 7 massacre would mean nothing if it ignited the entire region at once. Israel had been hunting Yahya Sinwar for more than a year. He was the Gaza chief of Hamas, one of the key architects of the October 7 attack that left more than 1,000 Israelis dead and hundreds taken hostage. He had disappeared into the tunnels beneath Gaza as the war raged above, sending out audio messages and coded instructions, emerging only through proxies and encrypted couriers. Killing him required more than a bomb. It required certainty, it required theater, it required patience stretched to the breaking point. Tonight was supposed to be the culmination of that patience. The convoy's route had been studied, rehearsed, and simulated thousands of times. Overhead surveillance had confirmed the pattern. When Sinwar moved, he did it inside layers of civilians, like soft armor. When he crossed an intersection, he preferred crowds. When he went to a safe house, he made sure there was a family living next door. Every movement was a message. If you want me, you will have to kill them too. On an innocuous side street, a small, white car waited with its engine off. The man at the wheel was not Israeli. His accent, his documents, his life story all belonged to this place. He had never seen a Mossad officer in person. His only contact was a voice on a secure app routed through layers of cutouts and codes. Tonight, his job was simple and terrifying. Block the convoy at the exact second the order came, holding Sinwar's car in a narrow bracket of exposed road, long enough for the strike to arrive. A siren wailed in the distance. The fruit seller kept walking. The child's bicycle rattled over broken asphalt. On a rooftop, 3 blocks away, a tiny camera hidden in a broken satellite dish sent a live feed of the street to an encrypted server, then to analysts watching from secure rooms deep inside Israel. They had argued about this moment for weeks. Too much risk of civilian casualties, too much risk of bad intelligence, too much risk of missing him yet again. The convoy turned into the street. The white car's driver inhaled once, hard, and eased his vehicle forward, drifting into the lane with the casual slowness of someone distracted. For 2 seconds, nothing happened. Then the driver of the lead vehicle saw him and tapped his horn. The street narrowed, walls seemed to close in, escape angles vanished. On the screen, the 3 heat signatures merged as the men inside leaned forward. The Mossad liaison looked at the military officer beside him. This was the moment every debate, every moral calculation, every sleepless night had led to. Somewhere, under that metal shell, sat the man whose orders had turned a peaceful holiday morning into a massacre. Somewhere nearby, people with no part in his decisions were going about their lives, unaware that they were inside an invisible kill box. A cursor hovered over a confirmation icon. A targeting computer finalized its geometry. The liaison knew that once the command left this room, there would be no taking it back, no pause button, no second attempt. So how did an Israeli operation get to this exact second, trapping the mastermind of October 7 in a corridor of sky and concrete? And why did so many people on both sides believe that pressing that button might save lives and damn them at the same time? To understand how this moment was engineered, it is necessary to understand who Yahya Sinwar was to both his followers and his enemies. Born in the Khan Yunis refugee camp in the 1960s, he rose through the ranks of Hamas from its earliest days, building a reputation as a ruthless enforcer and a strategist willing to sacrifice almost anything for the cause. He spent decades in Israeli prisons, mastering Hebrew, studying his adversaries, and learning the patterns of a system he would one day try to break. When Hamas launched its October 7 attack, Sinwar emerged as one of its central architects. He helped oversee the planning, the use of paragliders, motorbikes, rockets, and infiltrations that burst through Israel's southern border and overwhelmed communities that believed they were relatively safe. More than 1,000 Israelis were killed, including civilians slaughtered in their homes and at a music festival, while over 200 hostages were dragged back into Gaza. For Israelis, Sinwar became not just another commander, but the face of a trauma that felt like a national shattering. In the weeks after the attack, Israel launched a massive military campaign in Gaza. Entire neighborhoods were flattened. Hamas tunnels became battlegrounds. But even as bombs fell, Yahya Sinwar vanished deeper into the underground network his movement had spent years preparing. He communicated through carefully controlled couriers and sporadic recorded messages. His presence was felt not as a face on a screen, but as a signature in intercepted orders and strategic shifts in the battlefield. Inside Israel, the order was clear. Political leaders publicly vowed that the masterminds of October 7 would be hunted down wherever they hid, echoing the long pursuit that followed the Munich massacre decades earlier. Yet, translating that political vow into an actual operation fell to the intelligence community, and especially to the uneasy partnership between Mossad, military intelligence, and special operations units. Mossad's job historically focused on foreign operations, on the shadows outside Israel's borders, tracking financiers in Turkey, planners in Lebanon, coordinators in Iran. But October 7 blurred every line. The architect of the massacre sat inside Gaza, using regional allies and foreign support lines that extended far beyond the enclave's ruined streets. That meant the hunt would not be confined to a single map. It would unfold across Beirut, Tehran, and other cities where Hamas and its backers operated, targeting the network that protected Sinwar, even as the army hunted him directly on the ground. The first major strike in this wider shadow war came in Beirut. Saleh al-Aruri, a senior Hamas leader and deputy political chief, was killed in January 2024 in a precision drone strike in the Dahieh suburb, a stronghold of Hezbollah. Aruri had been deeply involved in building Hamas West Bank infrastructure and was part of the strategic leadership that had greenlit the October 7 attack. His assassination sent a message: no sanctuary was guaranteed. As months passed, other key figures fell. Ayman Nofel, a senior military council member, was killed by an Israeli strike. Additional commanders tied to rocket units, tunnel operations, and naval forces were removed one by one. Each strike was both tactical and psychological, aimed at dismantling the layers around the core. The implication was clear. The man at the center was not untouchable. His circle was shrinking. But killing Yahya Sinwar required more than degrading his network. It required a mandate that could withstand not only international backlash, but also internal doubt. Every assassination of a high-value target carries a moral cost: the risk to civilians nearby, the possibility of escalations, the precedent it sets. The October 7 massacre had shifted that calculus. To many Israelis, leaving Sinwar alive was not an option. To many outside observers, turning Gaza into a kill zone for one man threatened to blur the line between targeted justice and collective punishment. In closed rooms, Mossad officers and military planners went over the same questions again and again. Could they find a way to isolate him physically, separating him from the human shields he relied on? Could they hit him at a moment when his death would save lives rather than simply close a circle of revenge? And could they do it under conditions that would stand up, at least in their own eyes, to the stories they told themselves about the difference between them and the people they were fighting? Those questions shaped every decision that followed, from the choice of informants and methods to the very street where his convoy would one day be trapped. But there was still one missing piece: reliable eyes inside a world designed to see every stranger as a threat. The Gaza Strip after October 7 became one of the most heavily surveilled spaces on Earth. Satellites, drones, signal intercepts, and pattern analysis layered over a dense, shattered landscape. Yet, for all the technology, one reality remained. Without human sources, the picture would always be incomplete. Mossad had long cultivated networks in places far from Gaza. Istanbul apartments, where Hamas operatives met clandestinely, Beirut offices, where alignment with Hezbollah was negotiated, quiet Tehran neighborhoods, where Iranian officers coordinated support for Palestinian factions. These were traditional theaters for an agency built to operate in foreign cities under foreign names. After October 7, those networks were activated with a new intensity. Among the key figures in this extended architecture was Saeed Izzadi, a senior commander in Iran's Quds Force and head of its so-called Palestine Corps. He acted as a crucial link between Tehran and Hamas, channeling funds, training, and operational guidance. According to Israeli accounts, Izzadi was one of the architects who helped shape the conditions and support that made the October 7 massacre possible. In June 2025, he was killed in a precise airstrike near Qom. Operations like that served two purposes. They removed experienced coordinators who could help Hamas recover from losses. They also created pressure on the remaining leadership, forcing them into riskier behavior, more hurried travel, and increased reliance on trusted couriers, whose movements could, with enough patience, be tracked. Inside Gaza, however, the work was different. There, case officers and analysts had to piece together fragments. A whispered rumor that Sinwar had been seen in a particular tunnel branch, a sudden change in communications patterns, a rare sighting of a familiar bodyguard. Much of this effort fell to Israel's military intelligence and internal security services, but Mossad provided critical expertise in building long-term penetrations and in weaving foreign intelligence into the local hunt. One of the most valuable tools was not a satellite or a hacker, but a ledger. Money from Iran and other sources flowed through complex routes into Gaza, paying salaries, buying weapons, and funding tunnels. By mapping these flows, intelligence officers could narrow down where key leaders were likely to move and who they had to meet. The path to a man like Sinwar often followed the path of cash and logistics, not just encrypted messages. Recruitment efforts grew more aggressive, but also more delicate. In a place under constant bombardment, desperation and anger mixed with fear. Some potential informants sought protection for their families. Others wanted revenge against Hamas for decisions that had brought ruin to their neighborhoods. Others simply needed money. Each motive was a tool, dangerous, fragile, and subject to collapse under pressure. Tradecraft adapted to the environment. Face-to-face meetings, the traditional backbone of human intelligence work, became nearly impossible. Instead, handlers relied on layered communication channels, handwritten notes passed in chaotic markets, brief coded phrases embedded in ordinary conversations, dead drops disguised as rubble in bombed-out streets. Far from Gaza, Mossad officers also sharpened another weapon: travel intelligence. When senior Hamas or allied figures moved between Beirut, Tehran, Doha, or other hubs, their routes became opportunities. The assassination of Saleh al-Aruri in Beirut showed how an office, a routine meeting, even a supposedly safe neighborhood could be penetrated by a small drone guided by precise prior surveillance. Each success taught new lessons about how these leaders behaved when they believed they were out of immediate danger. Those lessons fed back into the model of how Sinwar might eventually be caught. Analysts believed he would move rarely, and only under conditions that maximized deniability. Inside vehicles associated with humanitarian or civil activity, under the cover of civilian convoys, protected by the presence of people who believed they were far from any battlefield. To catch him, the operation would have to infiltrate not only his security arrangements, but also the ordinary life around him. At some point, a breakthrough came. Whether through a compromised courier, a misstep in communication, or a fragment of overhead imagery that matched an existing pattern, a hypothesis emerged. Sinwar was using a specific set of routes between underground complexes and above-ground safe houses that still offered him access to the outside world. These movements were rare, but not random. From that moment, planning shifted. Instead of vaguely hunting a ghost, the operation began to outline a stage. Specific streets were mapped in excruciating detail. Cellular coverage was modeled. The positions of likely civilians at different times of day were cataloged. Plausible traffic obstructions were sketched and discarded, then sketched again, looking for a configuration that would hold a convoy in place without looking like a trap. There was still one problem. The people who would have to execute this on the ground could not be Israelis. They would have to belong to the fabric of Gaza itself: drivers, vendors, residents with believable routines. That meant Mossad and its partners would need to bet not only on their intelligence, but on the reliability of human beings whose lives had been torn apart by Israeli bombs as well as by Hamas decisions. What none of the planners could fully control, however, was how those people would react when the moment of truth arrived and the sky itself became part of the operation. As the plan moved from analysis to execution, the elegant diagrams on secure whiteboards began to meet the mess of reality. Every covert operation lives at the intersection of logic and chaos, and Gaza, after October 7, was chaos distilled. The first test of the concept came weeks before the final attempt. Intelligence suggested that a senior Hamas commander involved in the October 7 logistics, but not Sinwar himself, would be traveling along one of the identified routes. It was a chance to validate the timing, the traffic pattern, and the response of local security elements without spending the political capital attached to the mastermind's name. On that day, the designated collaborator driver froze. At the critical second, as the convoy approached, he saw a group of schoolchildren spilling into the street from a side alley. His training, his briefings, the quiet promises whispered by a voice on an encrypted line all collided with the immediate, visceral reality of children laughing and pushing one another across his path. He deliberately delayed his move, letting the convoy pass, then reported a mechanical issue. The strike was aborted. In Israel, some analysts called it cowardice. Others saw it as proof of something far more uncomfortable. No matter how carefully you design an operation from afar, the final decision is often made by someone with far less information and far more to lose. That failed test forced planners to adjust the timing windows, reducing the chances of school or market crowds, and to consider whether their human assets could truly be counted on when lives were visibly at stake. Meanwhile, the external campaign continued. The elimination of figures like Saeed Izzadi and other coordinators signaled to Tehran and Beirut that the long arm of Israeli intelligence was reaching deeper into their protected circles. Each strike risked retaliation, escalation, and diplomatic fallout. Each also narrowed the pool of people capable of providing Sinwar with safe alternatives. Pressure in one theater rippled into another. Inside Gaza, the hunt for Sinwar took on an almost mythic quality among both Israelis and Palestinians. For supporters of Hamas, he was the leader who had finally landed a devastating blow on Israel and survived to boast of it. For many Gaza civilians, he was the unseen figure whose choices had drawn destruction onto their homes. For Israelis, he was the embodiment of a nightmare that refused to end. This mythic status posed a practical challenge. Myths do not move in predictable ways. They are protected by stories, by whispers, by exaggerated claims of invincibility. To break through that, Mossad and its partners had to treat every rumor as both potential insight and deliberate deception. Hamas internal security knew it was being hunted. It seeded false trails, staged appearances, and circulated audio messages that might have been pre-recordings, designed to confuse analysts about Sinwar's real timeline. On at least one occasion, Israeli forces believed they had him cornered in a tunnel complex, only to find that he had slipped away hours earlier, leaving behind destroyed infrastructure and booby traps. Each near miss magnified both the urgency and the doubt. Were they chasing a man, or the shadow of a man whose decisions would always stay one step ahead of their intel cycle? As the months dragged on, pressure mounted not just from political leaders, but from the families of the October 7 victims and the hostages still trapped in Gaza. Every public statement about justice, every promise that the masterminds would pay, added another layer of expectation to an operation that remained, by necessity, shrouded in secrecy. The people running the hunt knew that failure would not be measured only in missed opportunities, but in faith lost by a public that wanted something concrete in return for their grief. Within the intelligence community, debates grew sharper. Some argued that the focus on Sinwar had become an obsession that risked strategic blindness. Killing him, they warned, would not bring back the dead or dismantle the ideology behind Hamas. Others insisted that leaving him alive would be a standing invitation for future atrocities, a signal that even the worst massacre in Israel's history could be survived by its planners. There were also legal and ethical arguments. International law experts, human rights advocates, and even some former security officials questioned the boundaries of targeted killing in a densely populated war zone where civilian casualties were already staggering. Could any strike on a figure like Sinwar truly be considered targeted when his environment was built around human shields? The planners, working inside classified bubbles, were well aware of these critiques. They did not change the mission, but they changed its constraints. In one internal meeting, a senior officer reportedly asked a simple, chilling question. If we knew we could kill him today at the cost of 50 civilians, would we do it? What about 20? What about 5? There was no easy answer. Any number, spoken aloud, risked becoming a moral line, and in covert war, lines have a way of quietly moving. It was in this atmosphere of friction and doubt that the final intelligence breakthrough came. A source, whose identity remains hidden behind layers of classification and rumor, indicated that Sinwar would soon be making a rare, above-ground movement along a specific corridor, at a specific time, under a convoy arrangement that analysts had modeled before. After months of false starts and agonizing restraint, the operation had one more chance. This time, every element would have to hold: the human assets, the timing, the technology, and the nerve of people watching events unfold in real time, half a step removed from the lives they were about to end. The day of the operation began like so many days in a prolonged war, with the dull, grinding rhythm of survival. In Gaza, families queued for water, searched for bread, swapped rumors about where the next bombardment might fall. In Israel, parents drove children to school under sirens and alerts, slow-motion routines shaped by constant tension. On secure bases and in windowless rooms, however, the atmosphere was different. Today, the models and maps on the screens were no longer hypothetical. The first phase was confirmation. Surveillance assets started watching the suspected departure point hours in advance. Overhead platforms monitored vehicular movement, while signal intercept units listened for changes in radio discipline among Hamas security personnel. Analysts looked not only for the presence of certain vehicles or bodyguards, but for the absence of others. A thinning of outer rings, a tightening of inner ones, subtle shifts that indicated a high-value principal stepping into the open. At some point, the pattern locked. A convoy formed with the configuration expected for someone of Sinwar's stature. Multiple vehicles, staggered positions, and civilian cover woven into the route. In one of the cars, thermal signatures matched a small group of individuals seated in a way consistent with a guarded VIP. No one would say his name out loud. It was not necessary. On the ground, the collaborator driver received the final go signal in the form of an innocuous message that matched a prearranged code. His instructions were brutally simple. Approach the intersection 3 seconds before the convoy, drift into the lane, and then stall at an angle that would leave the lead vehicle exposed to the sky, unable to reverse or accelerate without striking him visibly. He knew very little about the man he was helping to kill, beyond the stories everyone in Gaza knew. He knew that friends and relatives of his had died in airstrikes. He knew that Hamas controlled life and death in the neighborhoods where he lived. He also knew that if anyone ever suspected his role, there would be no escape. For him, the promise had been framed in terms of protection, money, and perhaps a way out for his family. But in the final minute before execution, none of those abstractions felt real. Only the road did. The convoy turned onto the designated street. Cameras hidden in damaged buildings provided multiple angles as vehicles rolled into the invisible box drawn by planners months earlier. The collaborator's car slid forward, slightly too slow, like a distracted driver fumbling with a radio. The lead vehicle's driver tapped the horn, then the brakes. The distance between them collapsed. In the operations room, the timing window opened. For a brief moment, everything aligned. Line of sight, minimal pedestrian presence, and a clear identification of the target vehicle. Yet, even then, nothing was absolute. A child on a bicycle zigzagged across the far end of the street. An older woman stepped out of a doorway, glanced at the parked cars, and hesitated as if deciding where to walk. Each moving piece appeared on screens as pixels and icons, But behind each one was a living person whose fate now hung on the next decision. The Mossad liaison and the military strike officer exchanged a glance. There was no way to make the choice clean. There was only the question of whether this was the closest to acceptable reality would ever allow. The order was given. Far away, a platform in the sky released its weapon. The munition traveled faster than any human thought. One moment, the convoy existed as it had a second before. Armored metal, glass, human beings in motion. The next, an incandescent tear ripped through the lead vehicle, folding it inward, shredding steel and flesh in the same impossible instant. The blast was tightly focused, designed to minimize its lethal radius beyond the target car. Even so, shock waves do not respect intentions. The collaborator's vehicle was thrown sideways, its windows shattered, its driver slammed against the steering wheel. 2 nearby storefronts lost their facades. The child on the bicycle crashed to the pavement, his ears ringing, his leg broken by flying debris. In the rubble of the destroyed car, flames licked up through torn metal. For a few seconds, there was only noise, alarms, screaming, the inert roar of the explosion still echoing in people's minds. Then, sound collapsed into a chaotic chorus. Cries for help, shouts of drone, accusations, prayers. In the operations room, new images came into view. Heat signatures flickered and then went dark. Secondary scans began immediately, looking for any sign that the target had survived or been moved. There was none. Within minutes, internal channels carried the assessment upward. High confidence that Yahya Sinwar had been killed. Outside those walls, however, nothing was clean. Hamas units rushed to the scene, sealing off the area, loading bodies and fragments of bodies into vehicles. Within hours, they framed the strike as another attack on civilians, another proof that Israel was indifferent to Palestinian life. In Israel, word slowly filtered out through hints and then open statements. The mastermind of October 7 was dead. The collaborator driver was extracted under cover of the chaos, disappearing into a chain of safe houses and covert routes that might one day lead him out of Gaza or might not. His fate, like the details of his recruitment, remained buried in files and memories that would never see daylight. In that street, burned rubber and scorched concrete marked the spot where a decision made in a quiet room had intersected with ordinary lives. For intelligence professionals, it was a hard-won operational success. For the people who lived there, it was another explosion in a war of many explosions, distinguishable from the others only by the foreign headlines it generated. And yet, behind those headlines, something had changed, not just in the balance of power between Israel and Hamas, but in the evolving doctrine of how far states will go and how precisely they will try to calibrate death in the name of security. The killing of Yahya Sinwar did not end the war. Rockets did not stop overnight, hostages did not instantly return home, and the grievances that fueled Hamas did not evaporate with one man's death. Yet, in the world of intelligence and statecraft, his elimination became a defining case study, a moment when technology, human sources, and political will converged on a single moving target. In Israeli doctrine, the operation reinforced a familiar but increasingly sophisticated belief that targeted killing of key commanders can reshape the calculus of adversaries by decapitating their leadership and signaling that no level of protection is absolute. The pursuit of figures like Aruri, Izadi, and ultimately Sinwar stitched together a campaign that spanned multiple countries, from Beirut to Qom to Gaza. Future planners will study how those interlinked operations created psychological and operational pressure, forcing Hamas and its allies into defensive postures that limited their ability to plan large-scale attacks. At the same time, the strike highlighted a growing reality of modern conflict, that the battleground is no longer confined to traditional fronts. Lebanon's capital, Iranian cities, and neighboring states found themselves hosting invisible duels between foreign intelligence services and clandestine networks. Each assassination carried the risk of drawing those countries deeper into the conflict, turning their streets into stages for someone else's war. For Mossad, the operation underscored both the power and the cost of precision. The technical ability to watch a street in real time, to model blast radii, and to synchronize human and machine at the scale of split seconds is unprecedented in the history of espionage. Yet, every layer of precision hangs over a moral void, because no algorithm can answer the question of what number of unintended casualties is acceptable in the pursuit of a man responsible for a massacre. Internationally, reactions split along familiar lines. Some governments and commentators framed the killing as legitimate self-defense, the lawful removal of a commander who had orchestrated a genocidal-style attack on civilians. Others saw it as part of a broader pattern of disproportionate violence, arguing that decapitation strikes inside a devastated enclave blurred the line between focused justice and collective punishment. In tribunals, academic papers, and policy debates, Sinwar's death became another reference point in the evolving legal and ethical arguments over targeted killing and urban warfare. The operation also raised deeper questions about the role of civilians in modern intelligence campaigns. The collaborator driver, the unsuspecting people on the street, the families living near the routes chosen for kill boxes all became unwilling participants in a calculus they did not design. For states that rely on such tactics, this is both a practical necessity and an ethical minefield. Without access to local networks, many high-level targets would remain unreachable. But with every use of such networks, ordinary lives are drawn closer to the blast radius. This dynamic extends beyond Gaza. When Israeli drones strike a Hamas leader in a Beirut suburb, the residents of that building and their neighbors are drafted into a covert conflict they never chose. When a Quds force commander is killed near Qom, the people on that street in Iran become witnesses to a war fought by proxies and shadows. In this sense, modern intelligence operations turn entire regions into layered battlegrounds, where neutrality is as fragile as a mistaken identity or a poorly timed walk down the wrong street. There is also a psychological legacy. For Israelis who lost family on October 7, news of Sinwar's death may have offered a measure of vindication, a sense that the state had not forgotten its vow to settle accounts. Yet even among them, many know that no operation, however precise, can repair the rupture that day created. For Palestinians in Gaza, his killing may be seen by some as martyrdom, by others as overdue consequence, and by many simply as another turn in a cycle that keeps grinding their lives to dust. In the long view, intelligence historians will likely compare the pursuit of the October 7 masterminds to earlier campaigns, like the hunt for those behind the Munich massacre, or the global search for figures like Osama bin Laden. Each of these operations pushed the boundaries of what states were willing to do outside traditional battlefields, normalized new forms of extraterritorial force, and created jurisprudence, both formal and informal, around assassination as a tool of policy. The core question, however, is not only what these operations achieve in the moment, but what they shape in the minds of those who come after. Does the elimination of Yahya Sinwar deter the next generation of militants, or does it harden their resolve by offering another example of heroic death under fire? Does it convince future leaders that orchestrating mass attacks will inevitably bring targeted death upon them, or does it signal that the only safety lies in hiding even deeper among civilians? And then there is the question for audiences far from the region, watching this story through screens and headlines. If you were the person in that operations room, staring at live feeds of a street in Gaza, knowing that the man responsible for the worst massacre in your country's recent history sat inside that car, would you have given the order, knowing that a child on a bicycle was still in frame? If you were the collaborator driver, trapped between fear of Hamas and promises from a foreign service, would you have turned the wheel into that lane, betting your life on anonymity and someone else's conscience? At what point does national security justify turning ordinary neighborhoods into temporary kill zones? And how long can democracies sustain operations that must remain hidden from full public scrutiny to function? These are not questions with easy answers. They live in the same shadowed space as the tradecraft that set the trap and the blast that ended one man's life. On that ruined street, the flames died out. The evidence was cleared. New stories, new grievances, and new plots began to grow over the scorched patch of asphalt, where a convoy once stopped and a cursor hovered over a button. The operation closed one chapter of October 7's aftermath, but it did not close the book. In the end, this is what modern espionage looks like. Not glamorous, not clean, but a relentless, quiet machinery that moves through lives and cities until a decision is made. and someone disappears from the world. If this operation opened your eyes to how real spy work actually operates in the shadows, subscribe to Hidden Ops for more true missions from the world of covert intelligence.